The train from Oxford rolled gently through the fog as Isabel Turner pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Beyond the blurred window, the fields of Wiltshire stretched endlessly, pale and silent under a shroud of early autumn mist. She clutched the letter that had brought her here, a formal invitation sealed with the emblem of the Crowhurst family. The request was simple, or so it seemed. She was to restore and catalogue the family's private collection of documents, stored in their ancestral estate at Alderwick Green. Yet, the tone of the letter had unsettled her. The archives must not be moved from the premises, it said, for their history is bound to the land. As the carriage slowed at a lonely platform, Isabel stepped out into the chill air. Only one other passenger disembarked, a frail man with a bowed back, waiting beside a horse-drawn cart. "Miss Turner?" he asked in a coarse voice. "I am Matthew, the caretaker. The Crowhursts are expecting you." The journey to Alderwick Hall took her along a winding path framed by bare trees. Mist clung to the branches like thin fingers, and every now and then, Isabel thought she heard the faint chime of a bell, though there was no church in sight. When they arrived, the estate loomed vast and grey, its windows like unblinking eyes. The gardens stretched into the distance, consumed by fog. Somewhere deep within that white veil, she saw the outline of an iron-framed glasshouse, broken, silent, and overrun with ivy. "Best keep away from the old garden after dark," Matthew murmured as he carried her trunk inside. "It holds onto things it shouldn't." Isabel smiled politely, though his words left a chill in her chest. That night, long after everyone had gone to bed, she couldn't sleep. From her window, she saw the garden again. The fog had thinned, and inside the glasshouse, a faint golden light flickered, just once, before disappearing into the mist. Her heart quickened. The air felt colder, heavier. And then she noticed something else. On her desk, beneath the flicker of her candle, lay a single dried leaf shaped like a human hand. Morning came grey and restless. The fog had not lifted, and the sound of dripping rain echoed softly against the window panes. Isabel dressed quickly, her curiosity stronger than her unease, and made her way downstairs to the library where her work would begin. The room was vast, lined with shelves that reached the ceiling. Dust floated in the dim light like drifting ash. On the long oak table lay boxes of parchment, bundles of letters tied in faded ribbon, and journals with the Crowhurst seal pressed into the leather. Matthew entered quietly, carrying a pot of tea. "Best start with the ledgers, miss," he said, setting the tray down. "They go back to the first Crowhurst who came to Alderwick, nearly 3 centuries ago." As he left, Isabel noticed something peculiar. On the far wall hung a series of portraits, each depicting a member of the Crowhurst line. But the last painting had been turned to face the wall. Its back was covered in cobwebs. Her fingers hovered near it for a moment, then she pulled it gently forward. A shiver ran through her. The woman in the portrait bore her exact face. The same eyes, the same curve of mouth, though the painting was clearly from a century before. Below the frame, an engraved plaque read, "Eleanor Crowhurst, Keeper of the Garden, 1823 to 1849. Her breath caught. The resemblance was undeniable, and a strange dizziness overcame her. She reached for the nearest chair to steady herself. How could this be? Later that afternoon, she began sorting through the family journals. Most were dull accounts of estate expenses, births, and marriages, until she came across a small, water-stained book without a title. The handwriting inside was elegant but frantic. "The shadows in the glasshouse whisper still," one entry read. "They call to the keeper when the garden grows quiet." Another note, written shakily, said, "It knows the blood that binds it. The next keeper will bear the same eyes." A sound startled her, a slow, deliberate creak from upstairs. She froze, listening. Then came a faint thud, like something heavy being dragged across the floorboards. She climbed the staircase cautiously. The hall was empty, yet the air smelled faintly of soil and rain. At the far end stood a door she hadn't noticed before. Its handle was cold beneath her fingers. She pushed it open. Inside was a small chamber, its walls lined with forgotten furniture and cracked mirrors. On the floor, covered in dust, lay another painting, half hidden beneath a sheet. She lifted the cloth. It was unfinished. A woman's form, roughly sketched, holding a lantern. The brushstrokes around the face stopped halfway, yet the outline was unmistakable. It was hers again. And just below, in dark red paint, someone had written 2 words that made her blood turn cold. Welcome back. That night, the wind howled through Alderwick Hall like a wounded animal. The house seemed to groan under the pressure of the storm, and the old windows rattled with every gust. Isabel sat at her desk with a single candle burning low, its light trembling across the parchment. She could not bring herself to sleep. Her mind returned again and again to the portrait, Eleanor Crowhurst, the woman who looked exactly like her. The words welcome back echoed in her thoughts, sharp and haunting. She opened the small journal once more, reading by the flickering light. Near the end, one entry caught her eye. The mirror must never face the garden. When the lantern burns, the keeper must look away. She frowned. The mirrors in the upstairs room, were they placed that way for a reason? She remembered how they faced the walls, not reflecting anything. A sudden creak came from the corridor. She rose, heart pounding, and took her candle. The light wavered as she stepped into the hall. The shadows seemed to move with her, crawling along the wooden panels. At the end of the passage, the faint glow of another light appeared, a lantern's glow. Matthew, she called softly. No answer. The glow flickered again, vanishing behind the door of the small chamber where she had found the painting. She hesitated only a moment before pushing the door open. The room was empty. But the mirrors had changed. They were no longer cracked or dusty, they gleamed as if freshly polished. In one of them, she saw her reflection, except that it was not moving as she was. Her reflection smiled. Isabel froze. The smile widened, slow and deliberate, before the glass clouded with a thin layer of frost. Then, from the mirror's surface, a drop of water rolled down like a tear. She stumbled back, her candle sputtering. The lantern light she'd seen earlier flickered again behind her, though she had not brought one. Turning sharply, she found a lantern resting on the floor near her feet, its flame burning a deep, unnatural blue. She bent down cautiously. The metal frame bore a familiar engraving, E. Crowhurst. A whisper came from the mirror behind her, faint but clear. Do not let it go out. The whisper turned into a second voice, this one identical to hers. You are already here. The candle died. The blue lantern flared bright. And in its light, the reflection stepped forward from the glass, the sound of breaking silver filling the air. The storm had passed by morning, but the air felt heavier, as if the land itself had absorbed the night's unrest. Isabel woke at dawn, her head throbbing. The blue lantern lay on the floor beside her bed, its flame long gone. She had no memory of returning to her room. Matthew knocked gently at her door. Are you unwell, Miss Turner? I must have fainted, she replied softly. Did you come to check on me last night? He shook his head. No one entered your room, miss. We never do after dark. His tone left her uneasy. As he left, she caught sight of his reflection in the mirror, only, it wasn't his reflection at all. The glass showed him standing behind her, but in reality, he was already halfway down the hall. She quickly turned the mirror toward the wall. That afternoon, determined to understand what was happening, Isabel ventured into the garden. The air outside was cold and still, the earth soft beneath her boots. The fog had begun to lift, revealing the outline of the glass house in the distance. Its iron ribs rose from the weeds like the skeleton of some forgotten creature. Inside, the scent of soil and decay filled her lungs. Shattered glass crunched underfoot. Beneath a collapsed wooden table, she noticed something glinting faintly in the dirt. She brushed the soil away and uncovered a metal plaque engraved with the words, "Here rests the keeper." Her breath caught. Below the inscription lay a sunken stone slab, almost like a sealed door. The earth around it was disturbingly fresh, as if it had been disturbed recently. From somewhere beneath the slab came a faint tapping sound. Once. Twice. Then silence. Isabel leaned closer. "Is someone there?" The tapping returned, faster now, urgent. Her fingers trembled as she touched the stone. It was cold, impossibly cold. Then a whisper slipped through the cracks like smoke. "Eleanor." Her own name was carried on the wind that followed, soft but unmistakable. The glass house trembled, vines shifting as though alive. The faint chime of a bell echoed through the rafters, though no bell could be seen. She turned to run, but the doorway had vanished. In its place was a wall of glass, sealed shut, her reflection staring back at her from every direction. And in the reflection's eyes, the blue lantern burned again. The light from the blue lantern pulsed faintly in the reflection's eyes, casting a ghostly shimmer across the glass. Isabel pressed her palms against the wall, desperate to find a way out. Her breath fogged the cold surface, forming pale clouds that melted into her mirrored self. Then she noticed it, on her wrist, a faint blue mark glowing beneath her skin, shaped like a crescent. It flickered in time with the lantern's light. The same symbol was carved faintly into the stone slab beneath her feet. The whisper came again, clearer now. "The keeper must wake." "Who are you?" Isabel whispered back, her voice trembling. "What do you want from me?" The reflection tilted its head. "You were chosen long ago. The garden remembers its blood." Suddenly the glass cracked in a spiderweb pattern, and the ground beneath her shuddered. The vines burst through the cracks in the floor, coiling around her ankles, cold and alive. The air was thick with the scent of iron and earth. "Stop," she cried, trying to tear free. "I'm not her." But the vines only tightened. A deep hum filled the air, a sound like a bell tolling underwater. The lantern on the ground flared to life, its blue fire rising higher, and with it came visions that flooded her mind. She saw a woman in the same glass house, 2 centuries earlier. Eleanor Crowhurst, her eyes burning with determination, sealing the stone slab with her bare hands. Behind her stood shadowed figures, whispering in unison. "The keeper binds the darkness. The blood renews the vow." Isabel stumbled back as the vision dissolved. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The vines released her suddenly, retracting into the soil. The lantern's light dimmed until it was only a trembling ember. The wall of glass before her rippled like water, and then, without warning, shattered outward. Shards flew into the air and dissolved into mist. Isabel ran through the opening, gasping as the cold morning light poured over her. The garden was silent again. Only the sound of the wind moved through the reeds. But when she looked down at her hand, the blue mark was still there, faintly pulsing beneath her skin. And from somewhere deep within the ground, she heard the faint sound of a bell, one single toll, slow and heavy. She turned toward the house. In the highest window of Alderwick Hall, a figure stood watching her. It was herself. The storm had not stopped since dusk. Rain lashed against the tall windows of the manor, and wind howled through the cracks of the greenhouse glass. Isabel sat by her candle, drenched and trembling, the pages of the Crowhurst journal open before her. Her breath caught as she turned to the final entry, written in her own handwriting. "The keeper of shadows must remain, lest the gates of Alderwick fall open again." Her hand shook as she traced the ink. It was identical to her own. The pen strokes, the flourishes. She had written this, but when? Her memory offered no answer. A faint knock echoed through the corridor. Slow. Hollow. It came from the end of the hallway, where the portraits of the Crowhurst family hung. Isabel rose, candlelight flickering, and walked towards the sound. As she passed each portrait, the eyes seemed to follow her. But when she reached the final frame, her knees nearly gave way. The portrait had changed. The woman in it, once Lady Crowhurst, now bore Isabel's face. The same pale eyes, the same tilt of the chin. Only, the expression was hollow. The painted Isabel smiled faintly, yet behind her stood a dark figure, tall and indistinct, with hands resting on her shoulders like a puppeteer guiding its doll. Her candle guttered. For a split second before darkness claimed the hall, the painted eyes blinked. Panicking, Isabel stumbled back to her room and locked the door. She pressed her ear against the wood. The manor was silent now, save for the steady drip of rain. Then, faintly, she heard the whisper. "You have always been here, Isabel." She turned to the mirror above the dresser. Her reflection smiled before she did. The glass rippled, as though it were water, and her reflection stepped closer, too close. Behind it, she saw the faint outline of the garden gate, the same one from her dreams, swaying open in the storm. The reflection whispered, its voice echoing through the room. The keeper must take her place before the dawn. The candle went out. And in the black silence, the sound of footsteps began climbing the stairs, slow, deliberate, and coming straight for her door. The door shuddered under a soft thud. Then another. Isabel backed away, her trembling hand searching for something, anything, to defend herself. The footsteps halted, followed by silence so thick she could hear her heartbeat. Then a voice spoke from behind the door. "You should not have read the final page." The whisper was unmistakably her own. Isabel's breath hitched. She stumbled backwards until she hit the mirror. The glass pulsed faintly beneath her shoulder, warm, as if something alive pressed against the other side. When she dared to glance over her shoulder, her reflection was gone. Only a shadow remained, tall, wavering, head bowed as if waiting for her command. The journal lay open on the floor. Ink bled across the parchment as if freshly written, forming words that hadn't been there moments before. The keeper must awaken. The hollow must be sealed. A cold gust swept through the room, scattering papers and extinguishing every candle. Then came the sound, the tolling of a single bell from somewhere deep beneath the manor. 1, 2, 3. Each strike vibrated through the floorboards, echoing with a low, mournful hum. Isabel clutched her chest, the rhythm felt like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. The air grew heavy with the scent of iron and earth. She ran into the corridor. Every portrait now bore her face. Their eyes followed her as she passed, each version of herself painted with subtle differences, some older, some younger, all wearing that same vacant smile. At the end of the hallway, a door she had never seen before stood ajar. A pale light seeped through the gap, accompanied by a faint sound, the rustle of leaves, the distant sigh of the wind. When she stepped through, she was no longer in the manor. She stood once more in the overgrown garden. The air shimmered with an unnatural stillness. In the center stood the gate from her dreams, open now, revealing a chasm beyond that pulsed like a living thing. From the darkness within stepped a figure robed in grey. Its face was veiled, its hands thin as branches. When it spoke, the voice came not from its lips, but from all around her. The hollow endures only through its keeper. You have returned to complete the circle. Isabel shook her head, backing away. I am not your keeper. But even as she spoke, she saw her hands glowing faintly, traced with the same runic marks from the bell's metal. The figure tilted its head, and a faint smile curved beneath the veil. You already were. The bell tolled again, louder, closer, and as its echo rolled through the valley, the shadows of Alderwick Green began to rise from the earth. The air trembled as shadows surged across the garden, writhing like living smoke. Isabel's hands glowed brighter, illuminating the runes that traced her veins. The figure in grey stepped back, letting her move forward. The chasm beneath the gate pulsed with an eerie light, and from its depths, the faint tolling of a bell rose again. Instinctively, Isabel knew what she had to do. She crossed the garden, each step heavy but certain. At the center, a stone plinth rose from the earth, engraved with the same crescent mark on her wrist. Atop it rested a bronze bell, ancient and blackened with age. As she approached, the air thickened. A voice echoed from the chasm below. Only the keeper may ring the bell. Only the keeper may close the hollow. Isabel reached out and grasped the bell's rope. Her reflection in the puddles around her stared with wide eyes, pale and silent. She pulled once. The bell sang a deep, resonant tone, and the ground shook. Shadows recoiled, twisting into writhing forms before dissipating like smoke in wind. Again she pulled, and again. Each toll carried her voice, her presence, into the hollow. Slowly, the chasm shrank, the gate began to close, and the air lifted its oppressive weight. By the final toll, the garden was still, the fog lifting to reveal the first sunlight in days. Isabel's arms trembled, the mark fading from her wrist as the bell stilled. She collapsed to her knees, exhausted but free. The figure in grey now stood at the gate, head bowed, silent. A whisper floated on the morning breeze, soft and distant. The keeper has returned. The hollow sleeps once more. Isabel rose, looking around the garden. The shadows were gone, the glass house in ruins but peaceful. She did not feel fear anymore, only the quiet strength of knowing her place, her purpose, and the weight of the legacy she now carried. The bell remained silent, bronze gleaming in the morning light. Alderwick Hall and its garden had endured, sealed once again by the keeper who had finally come home.